Let's begin. So we'll be continue a little bit with the pure HTML before starting to learn about CSS. And one major thing in HTML elements which we will cover before the CSS is the use of form elements. So I will share a screen now. Yeah. No. Okay, so if we see from here from W3 school, so form elements mean elements like this that you can, for example, write into these form elements. Then you can have this kind of, these are called radio buttons. Then you can have checkboxes like this. And then you can have some kind of submit or proceeding button for these forms and so on. So we'll see a little bit about those, what kind of form elements there are, and how do you construct these this kind of forms. So these are very common, and you need them basically anytime when you need to have some kind of text input or in different user interface input situations. So I will continue with this the same code what I did yesterday. We were doing this this form, this table thing. So I will continue here in the same folder by creating a new file called forms HTML. So I can play around a little bit here. And then the basic HTML structure, doc type HTML, and the HTML tag itself, and the head, and the closing for the head, body, and closing for the body, and let's not forget closing for the HTML. Then a light indentation here. Okay, there was some noise coming in. I think I'm gonna mute everybody for a while. You can then activate your microphone if you need need to talk. Here is the participants and mute all. Okay. So now, if you want to speak, you can then unmute. So hopefully this avoids any accidental microphone usage. Okay, so something about these forms. Let's first put here an first level heading, and then I will open this in the browser. Like so. Okay, now we have this nicely side by side. So whenever you are creating form elements, meaning that you want to use some of these input elements, be they text input, password input, email input, radio buttons, checkboxes, or whatever. If you are doing it with pure HTML and using the web browser to send the form, what that means we can discuss a little bit later. But in any case, you typically have to start with a form tag. So the idea is that this form tag now wraps all the form elements which belong to the same form. So for example, if you would have a form to display, let's say, user login, which would have a couple of input fields, one for, let's say, username or email, and then second one for the password, and then a button to submit that one. So you would create one form element here, and then inside here you would then declare the input elements for the username and password. And in the same way, for example, if you would be building in, let's say, an e-commerce application where a customer is ordering something and he needs to input his address details and names, shipping address, and so on. So again, you would create one of these form elements, and then inside here you would put the input elements which go into the form. So name, phone number, email, street address, city, postal number, country, and so on. So you put everything inside these form tags. This will then create a form for you, so that all the information what you want to have in that form is then bundled together. Okay, let's have the first. Let's start, for example, creating a form for, let's say, this is for user registration, for example. That's our imaginary situation. So we'll assume that let's use these divs to separate these fields. So for example, here we have name, and then we would have an input element. And then now we can put an attribute called type. Here the Visual Studio is suggesting text. That is one of the input element types. So let's see how the input element with type text looks like. Now we have an element with text, and it looks like this. So a text input element is like this. It's a single line input box where you can write some text. And then typically what you want to have in these forms is that now you have an input element text here. So let's assume that we would next want to put the, for example, email. Okay. Save, reload. All right. So now we have name and email here. So I can write here, for example, Lasse Haverinen, and then my work email here. And then if I would have a button to submit this. Okay. Next thing is to think about that. Okay, this information, my name and my email address, would be submitted. But how could the receiving part, the server, know that, okay, what does this text mean and what does this text mean? So you need to tell the server that, the server application. And you can do it by assigning, for example, a name attribute here. So you'd write here, okay, this is name. And then this one is email. So, okay, I forgot to. So now when you have these name attributes here with the value name and email, what would happen is that if this form would be submitted to a server, which we do not have now, but if we would have, and we would have some application running there which could actually receive the form values, now we would receive two values. We would receive value for name and value for email. And the values for those two fields would be whatever you have written here. So this name attribute is a pretty important one when you are dealing with the traditional forms. Okay. Then let's say that if we would be building this kind of user registration, we could ask for, let's say, if this would be some kind of web application. So we could ask that, okay, hey, please input your password. here again the tab 9 is suggesting pretty much exactly what I was thinking to write. Click. All right. So as you can see, the input element type is now password, and the tab 9 automatically figured out that probably you want to have the name for this element to be password. Yes, that is exactly what I want. So it's quite convenient. I don't have to write it. It can figure it out automatically. Okay, so input element type with password. How is that in any way different from this input element text? Let's see. Here I can write like so, but here when I write, this is the difference. So the browser by default does not show the characters here. So it gives maybe this kind of added security against people peeking over your shoulder. So that's what it does. It behaves exactly the same as an input element text, except for this one that it doesn't show the values. Okay. Then what else do we have? What else input elements we have? Then we have, for example, we have an input element for date. So we could say here that we want to have date of birth, for example. And here, this is suggesting again, like so, name it couldn't figure out. Let's put here, for example, DOB, like this. So how does this look like? Let's see. By default, the browser will render this kind of calendar control, which is quite handy. But what you need to be aware of is that how this is rendered, how does this look like? It depends totally on the browser. So we can see this, for example, if I open here this Microsoft Edge, and if I open the my web page there, so now you can compare it a little bit. So already it looks a little bit different. The calendar symbol, what is being displayed, is a little bit different. And let's see, is the drop down in any way different? No, this is pretty much identical. Do I have Firefox? No, I don't have that installed. Do I have Internet Explorer? Yes, the old Internet Explorer. Let's see, how does it look here? So here you can see that the Internet Explorer, which is a pretty old browser, but that does not recognize this date field at all. So it renders it just like any other text input field. So if you are implementing a web application, you can use this, but what you need to be aware of that it doesn't show the same way for all the users. So if you have a very detailed user interface design instructing you to make the date input, for example, to look at a certain way, then what is typically done is that instead of relying on this browser-based date presentation, date picker representation, some kind of custom JavaScript date picker is typically being used. So, and the reason for this is that then you can have total control on how does it look like. But this also works, has this kind of presentation. So if you only need a simple date picker and don't care whether or not the presentation is exactly the same, then this is one possibility. Where did my browsers go? Okay. Then let's see, there are input elements for div. Let's say how many dogs do you have? You could have input type a number, name, dog count, for example. So a number element, I cannot write anything there except numbers. And then I have also these up and down arrows. Again, how this looks like is a little bit depending on the browser implementation. Then, what else do we have? We have input element type file. And how that works is that it brings this kind of choose file button here. And I click, then I can choose a file of any type. For example, here. And what would now happen is that if I would submit this form, then this file would be submitted there through a mechanism called HTTP multipart posting. So as part of the form, I would send name, email, password, date of birth, and the dogs, and then I would also have the file, whatever I chose here. So the server could then save that file and do whatever with that one. Then I can have also have an input with type hidden. And here I must set a value. There's another attribute, let's say 56. As you can see, when you have an input type hidden, the browser does not show it at all. But if I would submit this form, I would the server would receive value 56 with the name some secret. So this is what you can use in some situations if there is some data what you must send with the form submission, but the value should not be presented for the user. Now here we have this attribute value. It is also possible to use this value here, for example, on these other parts. I put here value max pain, for example. Then you can see that it is there by default. It has this value. I can change it. But when I load this one, the value is max pain. There is also another possible attribute called placeholder. It looks like this. So it is a placeholder. It's like this, a little bit grayed out. It is not the value, but it is visible for the user. When I start to write something, the placeholder disappears. When I have again an empty input field, the placeholder is again visible. So these are handy and so on some situations. Then we can have a input type called reset. And how this looks like, that it looks like a button. When I click here, it seems that nothing happens. But if I had modified here something, and then I click on the reset, the form values are reset to their initial values. So this is quite handy in some scenarios. Then, if I want to have some kind of options to be available, but I want it so that the user can only select one of these options. So let's see if one of options would be available. For example, do you like ice cream or chocolate? That is totally binary question. You cannot like both. So I could have here, I could have an input type of radio. And then I could have here ice cream. Now I need to have, let's put another. Ice cream, and for example, a break, input type, radio, chocolate. So now I can choose, but as you can see, for some reason I can choose now all of those, and it doesn't really make any sense because I said that you could only choose one of them. And the reason for that is that I don't have a name attribute for these. The name attribute is the one which like brings the radio button logic together. So if I have here, for example, if the name would be favorite dessert, like so. So now it should work so that when I switch, I can only choose one. So this is the idea with the radio buttons. You must have the same name. The name bundles these radio buttons together, and all the radio buttons with the same name can only have a single selection. If I would like to have, as you can see, there is no default value. The default value can be set here is by having attribute called selected, if I recall correctly. No, do I have to have? I think it was selected. Why it doesn't work now? Or was it checked? I think it was checked, maybe, not selected. Yeah, checked, not selected, yeah. So you can set like this the default value, and again, if I click the reset, it will go to the initial state of the form. And although, by the way, we will stop today these lessons exactly in 1 hour. I have a company project presentation to attend to, so we will not be doing this until 1400 hours. We will stop exactly in 60 minutes. So at 13:25, we will stop this lesson. And then with these radio buttons, you can have only one. But if you want to have multiple options, then you should have a checkbox. So let's see, what could we ask as a multiple choice question. So, for example, pick your interests here. So if you would like to have some kind of maybe list of hobbies, I could have here input type checkbox, and then let's say here we could have football, and checkbox, and then let's say what would be interesting, maybe swimming, type checkbox, programming, type checkbox, maybe movies, checkbox, and then, for example, running. Okay. And now we have here a list of things what we can select. From the visual point of view, this works immediately. But if we would submit this form to a server, it would not work because, again, we don't have the names here. So what we would need to do is that we would put here a name and then come up with some name, and then again use the same name for all of these. Like so. Again, visually, having the name, it doesn't have any effect, but functionally, now it would work. If I would have here football and swimming selected, and now if you would submit this form, I would get an array of data, and the array would be named favorites. But what would be the values? We have not indicated. It will not automatically take whatever text you have here. And for that reason, you must also give here a value. That what is the value what will be sent to the server when this input is selected. So we could write here, for example, football, and then swimming. Or you could have some, if you would have some kind of numeric definitions for these, that okay, number 1 means football, number 2 means swimming. You could also do it that way. But this value in any way now indicates that what is the value, what will be sent to the server when this option is selected. So having a radio button without the value typically does not work very well. So now we would have this one. Have this one in a decent shape, and actually the same value thing applies here. So we would have here, we need to have this one also indicated so that what is the actual value, it doesn't read it from here. So the value attribute must be present. Then we can have some other input fields as well. Let's see. Does this work? What is your favorite color? Or actually, it would be better. Then it's the color. Let's see how this works. This is something that I have never used actually. But again, depending on the browser, you get this kind of color picker here. This might be useful in some situation. I have not yet encountered a situation where I would need this, but still good to be aware of that one. Then, no, is there something broken somewhere? No. Okay, so now we have discussed about these attributes called name and value. There are also other attributes. There is, for example, an attribute which can, let's see how this works, is we have here put, for example, this date of birth, if we put an attribute called disabled. So as you can see, this input field is disabled. It is presented, but you cannot use it. So it works for all of these. So if I have here disabled, now I cannot write the password. So this attribute is something what you can use when you are creating some kind of dynamic forms. So you have some source code, some program which is building the forms for you. And then based on some conditions, you can then have this disabled here present or not. So that is what that is used for. So for example, there can be so that if you would have a button to submit or save your information or to proceed in this user registration, but if we would have, for example, here a field which you must click to indicate that do you accept the terms of use for this application. So how it could work is that we would have a disabled attribute on a button, and then by default, and then when the user clicks that yes, I accept the terms of use for this application, and then as a result of that click, then the disabled attribute would be taken away from the submit button so that the form could be submitted and the registration completed. So let's see then the submit button. So input type submit, and so that this has value. Yeah, so you can create a button which works as a submit, but works to submit all the data in the form, and the value attribute defines that what you have the text on the button. So now how this could work is that we could have here disabled by default, so that if the button is visible, you cannot create it unless you have here unless you have a checkbox. For example, like this. So the logic would be so that by default, this button has a disabled, but when I click here, then the disabled attribute would be removed. But to do that, I would need to do some programming, and we don't have the skills yet for that one. So we cannot do it now, but that is the idea. That then we could have as a functionality when I click here, then this disabled would be removed by the program, and then the button would be activated. Then some other useful values, for example, for we have here the number field for the how many dogs. So it doesn't make much sense to indicate that I have -7 dogs. So I could say here that, okay, mean value is 0. So now I cannot go to the negative values. I can only have positive values. We could start here by saying that value is 0, so that's the default why we start. 0 dogs, and then I could increase, but I could not go to the negative dog amount. And then if for some reason you need to have the maximum to set, then there is also the max. So for example, if it would only be possible to have maximum of 3 dogs, so then I could set the max 3, and then it doesn't go above there. Or if we would have max 30, and then there is this step. If we could add in increments of 5, we can have a step 5, and then you can see here we add with 5s on this button. Then there is an input field called range. Let's see how that works. Again, something that I have not used in any real life situation, but the range gives you this kind of slider control. And I guess here also the min and max would work. Let's see what we put if you min 0 and max 10. So then it has 10 steps here. This becomes like this, with more bigger steps. If we put here max 100, then I think we have more this kind of smoother movement of this one. If we put max 2, then it's with these kind of very big steps. So this might also become useful at some scenarios. Okay, any questions about these so far?
Could you show us the second last part of the code? What was it again? Terms of usage. There we go.
Okay.
I'll quickly copy that into my code as well.
Yeah.
To keep it as a reminder. Input type. Checkbox. Name. Thank you.
Okay, there is one important thing still to cover about these forms is that now when we have here this button submit, what happens by default action on the browser is that when I click on the this submit button, the browser will collect all these values and then with the names and then submit to the server to the address which currently we have not specified. So basically, when we have not specified the address, it will submit it to the same address where this same URL where this form was loaded. And as you can see, something happened here on the URL when I clicked here on the create user. Do you remember what was the terminology for these, what you have here after the question mark? You see name, Max Payne, and email, and password, and DOB, and dog count, and photo, and so on.
Those are queries.
Yeah, these are called query parameters. So, and for these fields which are empty, you can see, for example, here this email field. It's empty, it doesn't have any value. This AND character is a separator which separates these key value pairs. If the value is empty, then there is nothing. So that is one way how you can transmit information to the server. And what happens basically then, let's write here something. Okay. Now click. Now there is more values here. So what happens here when you are transmitting the information here in the URL? It is because the form data will be sent to the server as a part of a GET method request. So yesterday we talked about these different HTTP protocol request methods. They were the GET, POST, PUT, DELETE, and then a couple of others. When you see a form being operated like this, that when you click on the submit button, the form fields appear here in the URL. It means that you are now sending a GET request. And because it's a GET request, the GET request doesn't have any body. So when you are transmitting data with the GET request, you must transmit the data in the URL. And here they are as so-called query parameters. So there are query parameters when they are after this question mark character. So there is a request for this resource, and these parameters are being transmitted. And you can control this, what is the HTTP method, what the form uses. We have not defined anything, so based on this behavior, we can deduce that, all right, the default behavior must be a GET method. If you want to specify what is your method, you can write it here as an attribute to the form element. You could set it as a post. So now let's see how it's a different situation. I will delete these from here. Now reload again. Test something. Now I have a post request and I click. You see the URL did not change. If we see here on the inspect element, this is the primary debugging tool in the browser. You get it if you right click on an empty area, inspect element. You can see here on the network tab, probably, let's see. Yeah, here, if you click on this request to the form HTML, here we can see on the header selection, these are the details of this request. We can see that it is now containing this form data. And these are the fields, name equals test, email equals test. And notice now that these fields, what we have here, name and email, they are what we have written here as this name attribute. For example, this DOB is present. DOB has value 2020-10-20. This is one way of expressing dates. When you are transferring date information or time information, it is important that you are aware, and if it concerns some other parties, that everybody is aware that what is the used date format. There are multiple different date formats. So that is also an important thing to consider, that what is the format in which you want to transmit the data, and which is the format that the server expects the data to be transmitted. Okay, but in any case, you can see the difference. When we are using the post request, we are sending the form data in the body of the request, and the query parameters are not present. When we are using a get request, the get request does not have any body, so therefore the only location where you can transmit the data is basically in the query parameters, so they will show up in the URL. And because of this fact, I recommend that you always send data with post or put methods, because that is the way how the HTTP protocol has been designed. In the HTTP protocol specification, when you see the get method, the documentation says that get should only used when you are reading something, some information. So obviously, when you are submitting a form, you are not reading some resource, but you are sending data. So therefore, get method is not a good choice. Technically, it works, and it can be made to work, but semantically, it is wrong. It has the wrong meaning. Okay, so then another important attribute here would be what this is suggesting, action. So this action attributes now allows you to specify a URL where this form would be submitted. So you could write here, for example, myserver.com user registration, if I can write. If you would have an application running at myserver.com and you would have the application working so that it can handle a post request to this address. If you have not programmed the server to work with this path, this address at myserver.com, then obviously it will not work. This is just an example. But if you want to control where your form is being submitted, this action attribute is how you can do it. And this is now the default browser behavior. So if I write again here something, and then now if I click create user, you can see it is now trying to access myserver.com/user registration. This site can't be reached. Well, right, there is no such site existing. I just came it up. So I get an error here. Okay, so that's about it for the forms. Why did I see here the, okay, oops. Yeah, okay, I had missing this method here. I was wondering why I didn't see this post or get here in the debugger, but I can right click here and see some fields as well. Name path. Okay. Okay. I think now we have a good moment to start talking about CSS. So with HTML, you can only create web pages which look like this, meaning they have no styling at all. So this is just the default behavior of the browser for these elements. When you want to create any kind of styling, for example, if you want to create a web application which looks like this, then you will need to apply a whole lot of CSS. So most of the web design work, when you're implementing a design to look like this, most of the work is done at the CSS side. And how CSS works is that it works so that you write these styling rules. You write styling rules saying that I want the font to be this, I want the font size to be this, I want the font color to be this, then I want the background color to be that, and I want to have this much white space on top of this text, this much white space on top on the bottom of this image. Like you see, for example, here there is this white space area. I want this to be centered, I want this to be aligned right or left or whatever you want. So you write these CSS rules, these styling rules, and then you apply these rules to these elements, to any HTML element, by using a system called selectors. So CSS selectors is the way how you target that which element you want to style. And there is a whole bunch of different selector mechanisms as is visible here. We will start playing around with the most basic ones and commonly used ones. But before that, we would need to have something which we want to style. Should we use this this my hello world here? Maybe so. I will use this document. Maybe I will take a copy here. So I will copy this hello world here, rename hello CSS, for example. Okay, so now you write this this CSS styling by defining the CSS rules. Why is it not working? Okay, for some reason I couldn't drag and drop it there. Okay, here is my target for doing some CSS thing. So there is 3 ways how you can, or where you can write the CSS styling. And those are called external, internal, and inline styling. Inline styling means that you are writing the CSS rules directly as part of the HTML element itself by using attributes. So, for example, if I would like to do something for this text here, this level 2 header, let's say I would like it to be red as a color. Here is my element, say level 2 header. When using this inline CSS, I can write use an attribute called style. And then here I can start to write CSS rules. I can say color red. And now it is red. I can say font size 60 pixels. And now it is with 60 pixel size. I can say background color green, red and green, perfect match, like so. Okay, this is called inline styling. Can you already recognize that what is the downside of doing the styling like this? Why do you not want to style your applications with inline styling?
it becomes very messy.
Yeah, it's messy, especially when you have lots and lots of style rules. Here we have only 3, and we have already quite long text line.
And it's not reusable.
Yes. So now let's say that I would like to have this one here as well with the same styling as this one. So with inline styling, I could go here and copy here, and technically it works. But if I do this in my application and I have hundreds of or multiple locations where I'm using the same styles, and then if I want to change the style a little bit, for example, I decide, hey, I actually want to be 59 pixels. Now I changed here 59. This is still 60 pixels. So it becomes quite tedious to go on and change it everywhere. Especially so because here we are dealing with extremely simple case. We have only one page. But in a real life situation, you are not even having pages. You are having mostly like small individual components or some kind of templates. But if we are having still HTML pages, you would have tens of different HTML pages and possibly hundreds of different templates or components if you are using some more advanced implementation techniques. So it makes absolutely no sense to go on and modify these hard-coded rules, inline rules at every location. And it becomes totally impossible to manage them in any meaningful way. So for that reason, what I recommend that using this style attribute is only for temporary, maybe testing purposes, or if you need to apply some small styling to some individual element somewhere. Only at that situation, I recommend that you would use this inline styling. Okay, there are 2 other mechanisms. They were the external, internal, and inline. So this was the inline. Let's see the internal then. The internal thing goes so that here in the head part, you have this style area, which you declare with these style tags. So now, instead of having this inline styling for this red color and font size 59 and background color green, I could now declare it here. So I could say here that yes, I want to have color red. Then I want to have the font size that 60 pixels. And then I want to have the background color to be that green. So meaning that now I don't need to have this declaration here or here anymore. I can declare it here in my internal CSS styling rule. Now I have declared here these rules, but next step what I must do is that I must somehow target these rules for the elements which I want to style. And this is now where these selectors come into play. And you should Google this, open this same site. So Google CSS selectors, and the first hit will be this site most likely. So you should open this on your own computer so that you can see it as well. So how this works is that here is the selector introduced. Here you have an example, and then you have a description of that. So you use this selector syntax you use in the CSS when you are using this internal or external CSS. If I would like to target all H2 elements, I could write selector using this element selector, meaning that I would write here H2 and then put the styling rules inside those curly brackets. like so. This is now the selector. This is now the styling rule, which is applied for all elements which match the selector rule. Now I have an element selector. It is this one. It says all H2 elements. So it will take this one and okay, I don't have any other H2 elements. Let's see. So now the rule is applied here. And I can verify this if I use the debug tool to inspect the element. I click here on the left. Now I can select here. And this is where this tool becomes extremely handy. When you have this elements mode selected and you have then an element selected, then it displays here the style rules which are in effect. Here I can see that these are the rules which are now applied to this element. And these are the rules which make this element look as it looks like. So this is the tool what you must use whenever you are wondering that why does this element look like it does. And you will be wondering that quite a lot in the future, I can guarantee that. So here I can see I have this H2 selector applied and these three rules. Here it shows that where is this rule defined. It is defined at line 6 in hello CSS.html. And if I want to test the effect of these rules, I can of course or find the right combination so that it looks how I want it to look. I can go here, modify, save, reload. Maybe it's too not so right. Maybe it's 52. Modify, save, reload, or maybe this should be yellow. Modify, save, reload. Maybe blue is better. Modify, save, reload. This is one way how you can find the correct styling for your purposes. It takes a bit time because you have to save, modify, save, and reload your changes. What I like to do is that I like to find the correct combination here in this debugger, because here I can go and select these rules. I can write immediately, see the change, or I can use even the arrow keys in my keyboard with these pixel values, numeric values. I can see that, okay, yeah, it should be exactly 71 and nothing else. Then for the color, I can use here a color picker. I can say that, okay, this is the shade of red what I'm looking for, right? And the blue looks a little bit off. Maybe it should be more in the violet. Yeah, maybe this is great. And then maybe it needs some other a little bit, let's see, font style. Maybe it should be in italic. Yes, now it's perfect. So here you can modify the CSS and you can see the effects in real time. And then when you have done this, then I can go, for example, here and copy and put them here. And now I have the values exactly as I want. And I didn't have to say modify, save, reload for every change. So
how did you do that again?
Yeah, so I can modify them here, then I can copy and paste them here. So I can go here and write some more styling, for example, padding top 100 pixels, padding bottom 100 pixels. I can write here rules, and I can modify the values here. And then I can select all these, and from the keyboard with Control-C, I'm copying. And then I can, it's like any other clipboard, and then pasting them here. It is also possible to configure this so that when you are modifying something here, it would modify directly your files. But that is all at least in my experience, that is only usable or feasible when you are dealing with these kind of pretty much straight HTML and CSS files, which is not the case anymore these days. When you are in real life, you are dealing with individual JavaScript components and using the styling there. So it really doesn't work that much in real life that you modify them here directly. So let's not spend too much time on getting that to work. But it's also possible that you can configure this tool so that it has access to your file system. And here are these blue checkboxes. This is a really great tool. You can deactivate these, see what is the effect of each rule, toggle it on and off. And the best part in this is that it works on every website. For example, I go back here to this Amazon. If I would like to see that, how have they created this grid here? How have they managed to get these side by side? Or what is the font what they're using here? I can open this tool, find my desired element. I activate it here from the left side, this selection tool, and then I click the one which I'm interested in here. Click. Now I see here I have an H2 element with a class attribute. That's something what we will discuss soon. This is a CSS selector thing. And then here I can see that these are now the CSS styling rules which are applied to this H2 element. And then I can go on and modify here. I can activate, see, does it have any change? How does it work? Okay, that doesn't have. Here, okay, this is font size, something changed. And they have here some other rules. If I activate here, you can see how it modifies the view in the web browser directly. Then I can see, okay, how is this built? This H2 is inside this kind of div with some class for CSS selector targets. Okay, they have here some padding. Padding means like an empty area around the element. What happens if I toggle this off? Okay, it changes like that. Okay, margin bottom. Okay, that's how they achieve this white space there. I can toggle that on and off. Or I can see that, okay, what would happen if I modify it here? Maybe like so, and so on. So this is a really powerful tool for learning how these are constructed. How is the layout constructed? How is the styling implemented? For example, here I can see they have this is called a class because it has this dot in front. It is documented here. It is here, this class selector. So when you have a dot and then some name, this selector selects all elements which has attribute class with the matching value. So this is now a class selector. If I disable this display flex, oops, it's somewhere else activated. It should have broken down their layout entirely. But it didn't. Maybe it wasn't not depending on that flex attribute. Okay, let's see if we take this one. Do they have here a flex as well? Flex basis. Here we can see how that affects. Okay, they have it there. Min width. Yeah, so basically it gives you the possibility of deconstructing the entire CSS in the application or in the web page. Of course, this is only working in or doing the modifications in your browser memory. So whenever you reload, you lose all the changes what you did. But this is a really powerful learning tool. And now, if you're interested in improving your skills, whenever you notice an web layout which looks interesting, you definitely should make a habit so that you open the inspect element tool and see that, okay, what are the tricks what they are using to achieve each thing. What makes it looking interesting. Okay, but that's for the inspect element tool. It's something what you should practice constantly and having open constantly. Okay, so but here we have this simple selector which selects all these H2 elements. We have only one H2 element here. Now here we have this level 3 header. It's now this one. If I would like to target the same styling for this what I have now for this H2, for this H3, then I could use a comma here to choose also the target, also the all H3 elements. Now that works. So what you can learn from this is that you can use comma and have multiple selector rules for a single styling definition. Another alternative is that we could define a class. So I could have here, for example, grade heading. I can give a name. I put here the dot. Now I am using this class selector. So now this dot grade heading means that I want to select all elements which has a class attribute with this name. Let's add here class grade heading. And then I can put the same here, class grade heading. Now the result is the same. I'm targeting all those. If I decide that, yes, this should also be with the same styling, I can go here, class, grade heading. Now they all look like the same. They all have the same styling. Now they look a little bit silly because they have the same, maybe the size. Never mind that they are of different H1, H2, and H3. So maybe it would be best to take this font size out of there. So now the font size is decided by the browser default implementation, and the other styles is are being applied. So what this means is that this class is something what you should typically use when you want to target multiple elements with the same styling. This is the most common way of doing it. Then, if you think about that, okay, I would like to make this image smaller. It's too big, this Chuck Norris image here. It is this one. And I would like to make it smaller, maybe give it a nice, maybe black color border around it. I could use, for example, an attribute called ID. And then if this ID, I can give a name here, for example, main pic, or let's say main image. An ID attribute with this value should always be unique to a single element. So you should never have multiple elements in the same view which have the same ID values. The idea of the ID is that you can target individual elements with this ID, this value in the ID. If I want to now target some CSS styling with an element with certain ID, I can use here this ID selector. So a hashtag and then the ID value. I write here in the CSS, hashtag, then the value in the ID, main image. And now if I want it to be smaller, let's put width. And then there are different ways how you can put it with percentage. These CSS size units is a story of its own. but you can, for example, have in the percentage or fixed pixels or a couple of other units. Let's say I want to use the pixel size, so 100px width. What happens? Now it's with 100 pixel size. You can notice that the height, when I have not defined the height is automatically scaled to maintain so-called image aspect ratio. So the aspect ratio is something, is a term which is the relationship between the width and height. And as a very important guideline you to remember is that you should never break the original aspect ratio anywhere. Meaning that you should never, for example, do so that to fit your web application or web design with some image, you go on and let's say, okay, maybe this size should be 250 originally, and then you decide that, oh yeah, it's too big in the vertical direction. Maybe it should be smaller. We can see, by the way, here what is the automatic size. Here we can see it's 250 in width and 166.656 pixels in the height. So maybe you have decided that, yeah, hey, it should be only 100 and let's say 40 pixels height. Now you have broken the aspect ratio and the image looks downright silly. And what this image does is that it makes you look like a total amateur. So never, ever, never, ever do this, that you break the aspect ratio. If you need to fix some image size, you need to go on and modify the image size in some program which allows you to cut the image into smaller. Do not go on and scale it into smaller size and therefore breaking the original aspect ratio. It looks totally silly and never go on and do this. In this course, we will have a final exercise where you need to implement some website and design it. So if you show up with images with this kind of broken aspect ratios, there will be great punishment in points for you. So do not do this ever. Always respect the original aspect ratio. So if some image is too big, then you need to go to use Photoshop or GIMP or whatever editing software and cut the image to be of the right size. Do not break the aspect ratio. Okay, but our original goal here was to make this smaller and then give it a nice, let's say, black border around it. I can use a border CSS style. Then I can write, for example, it should be 10 pixels thick. It should be totally solid, and then it should be black in color. Now there is a black border around it. What this does is that this is so-called shortcut rule, because with a single CSS rule, we are setting the width, we are setting the border style, and we are setting the border color. And what we are doing is that we are doing it for all the sides at the same time. So in CSS, there is this important concept called box model, which is visible. It just happens that it is visible here. This thing is called the box model. And it is a box. It has 4 sides in it. So it has the left, top, right, and bottom side. And in this box model, you can control the styling of all these 4 sides individually if you want. Or you can, of course, have all the sides having the same kind of stylings. And how this box model works is that here in the core of this box, it is now represented with this. in the core of this box is now the actual element. It is now here, for some reason it says, okay, now it's proper. It now shows that the element size is 250 pixels width and 166 pixels in height. Then next part is something known as padding. So this padding is basically some padded area, like an empty area, though it can have some color as well, depending on the element background color. And then comes the border, and then comes margin. So the box model has these four things. It has the actual element, padding, border, and margin. So, and here in this debug tool, we can see that the padding does not have any values. The border now has values of 10, because we set the border value to be 10 here. And we don't have any margin. Let's see what happens if we add some padding, how that works. We can say that padding, 20 pixels. When we don't specify any side, we are setting the same value to all sides. Now, it looks like this. It has this white because white, or actually this is transparent, I think. The padding or the element doesn't have any actual any background color. So if we go on and set some background color for this image, background color, and let's say that it should be red. Now you can see that the element background color is also the color of this padding area. Then comes the border. It is this black area, and then has this margin. We can also specify some value for the margin. Margin, let's say 200 pixels. So this margin is now empty white space area. Now it looks like this. Here, this orange now is the margin area, 200 pixels on every side. Then we have the border. It is now the black one, 10 pixels. And then we have the padding, which is now 20 pixels on all sides. We could also do it so that we set here margin top 200 px. Now the top area is 200 pixels and the other three parts are not set, so they are now with 0. So we can have here also, let's say that we want to have the padding bottom to be of 0 px. We can also control these other settings individually. So now it looks like this. The padding is now at the bottom, it's 0, but on the right, top, and left, it is 20. And this is the CSS box model. Okay, we are now at 13:25. I have another there is company project presentation where I need to be present now, so we will stop our class here today. Your homework will be to play around with CSS on the same work what you did in the last homework. So add some styling. I will write some detailed instructions. They will be in the Moodle today, and that will be your homework for next week. Okay, so that's it for today. We'll see. We'll continue from here on next week.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.